Okay, so in the last session, we have discussed about statements in C#, right? So there we have seen, how to execute your actions based on different set of conditions. So basically, what is the use of a statement? So whenever you want to execute any action based on set of conditions, then you would be needing statements. So we have seen two different types of statements, like if else, nested if, and another statement is switch statement. Another statement is switch statement. Now we know how to execute different actions based on different set of conditions. Okay. Okay. So let's discuss another concept today. So first, try to understand my requirement. As per my requirement, here I need to print numbers from 1 to 100. First I have to print 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, like this, 99 and 100. Try to understand the concept. It is very, very important. I need to print numbers from 1 to 100. So whenever you want to print anything, you'll have to use output statement, that is console.write or write line, right? Okay, so in order to print numbers from 1 to 100, here also you'll have to use same output statement, that is console.write line. So first we need to print 1. How to print it? Console.write line 1. Next print 2. Console.write line 2. Next print 3. Console.write line 3. So if at all you are going to print numbers up to 100, so what has to be done? To print each and every number, one separate statement has to be written. Every time you'll have to write the same statement, console.write line, console.write line. If at all you are going to print numbers from 1 to 100, so what has to be done? The same statement has to be written 100 different times. The same statement has to be written 100 different times, and every time it has to produce one different output. First it has to print 1, then it has to print 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to 100. So if at all you are going to print numbers from 1 to 100, so what has to be done? The same statement has to be written 100 different times. If I ask you to print numbers from 1 to 1000, so this has to be written 1000 times. If at all you need to print numbers from 1 to 1 lakh, the same statement has to be written 1 lakh different times. See, printing numbers from 1 to 100, this is a very simple scenario. It's a very simple requirement. In order to achieve a simple requirement, you need to write your statement 1 lakh times. If you are going to print numbers from 1 to 1 lakh, the same statement has to be written 1 lakh different times. Right? So what we are doing here? We are duplicating our logic. We are duplicating our logic. We are writing the same statement again and again, 1000 different times, 1 lakh different times, 100 different times. Just think about the complexity. If you are going to print numbers from 1 to 1 lakh, so the same statement has to be written 1 lakh times. Here you will see 1 lakh different lines of same statement. Your logic is getting duplicated, and it also increasing lot of complexity, which puts lot of burden in the system. It will increase a lot of complexity, and readability is also going to be difficult. Debugging process is also going to be difficult. You will see so many disadvantages over, because you are writing the same statement again and again, 1000 different times, 1 lakh different times. It's a very simple requirement. In order to achieve this simple requirement, you'll have to write your statement 1 lakh different times, which is not at all recommended, because there will be 1 lakh different lines. It will increase a lot of complexity. That is the reason what I'm saying here, I don't want to write the same statement again and again, because this is a very simple requirement. In order to achieve this requirement, numbers from 1 to 1000, 1 to 1 lakh, you'll have to write the same logic again and again, those many number of times. Here you're duplicating your logic. It is increasing lot of complexity. So that is the reason I don't want to go with this approach. I don't want to write the same statement again and again in different times. I want to write this statement only once, because if you look into this, the statement is going to be same, console.writeLine, console.writeLine, console.writeLine. Only this output is going to be changed. The statement is going to be same in all the cases, only this output is going to be changed. That is the reason. So whatever is getting repeated multiple times, I don't want to write that again and again. I don't want to duplicate my logic. I don't want to increase the complexity. I want to write this statement only once. I want to write this statement only once. I don't want to write it those many number of times. I want to write it only once, and this same statement has to be executed in different times. If I say 100, the same statement has to be executed repeatedly 100 different times. If I say 1000, the same statement has to be executed 1000 different times. If I say 1 lakh, the same statement has to be executed 1 lakh different times. And every time it has to produce a different output. In that way, you can avoid the complexity of, if that can be possible, you don't have to write the same statement again and again those many number of times. Write it only once and execute it repeatedly based on set of conditions, based on your requirement. If at all you need to print numbers from 1 to 100, repeat the same execution 100 different times, and every time it has to produce a different output. If you are going to print numbers from 1 to 1 lakh, don't write the same statement 1 lakh different times. Write it only once and repeat this execution 1 lakh different times, and every time it has to produce a different output. So finally, I don't want to write the same statement again and again. I want this has to be executed n number of times based on my requirement. If I say 100, the same statement has to be executed 100 different times. If I say 1000, the same statement has to be executed 1000 different times, and every time it has to produce a different output. So basically, I would like to repeat the execution process. I would like to execute the same action again and again in different times. I would like to execute the same action. An action can be a single statement or group of statement. In my case, my action will have only one statement, that is console.writeLine. I would like to execute the same action. I would like to repeat the execution of the same action multiple times. It can be 1, 2 or n. So basically, if I say 100, the same action has to be executed 100 different times. So basically, I'd like to repeat the execution process based on my requirement, based on set of condition. So whenever you want to repeat your execution process, then your approach should be towards another concept that is called loops. So what is a loop? What is a loop? Whenever you want to repeat the execution process, then you'd be needing a loop. The repetition can be possible only through a special concept is called as loop. Loop is used to repeat the execution process. When you want something, some action has to be executed repeatedly in different times, then your approach should be towards loops, because that repetition can be possible only through loop. When you talk about a loop can be implemented in 3 different ways. Your repetition can be implemented in 3 different styles. Those are going to be while loop, do while loop, and for. The repetition could also be done through the 4th one, that is for each. But for each is also one of the implementation of for, which will reduce some burden on the developer. But the internal logic is going to be same as for only, just to reduce some burden on the developer, just to reduce some complexity. In few places, they provided one of the ready-made loop that is called for each, but which is also the implementation of for. But ultimately, we have only 3 loops Those are while, do while, and for. Okay. So whenever you want to repeat your execution, then your approach should be towards loop. When you talk about a loop, so you can repeat your execution using three different styles, three different ways. Those are going to be while, do while, and for. Any questions, guys, so far? Quick answer, I want to see. Everybody. Okay. I think Priyanka is absent today. Okay. Let's move towards the first one, that is while loop. Let's see how to repeat your execution process using while loop. Let's see small syntax. How to write your logic to repeat the execution process. Simple. Here you have to use one system defined keyword called while. It will be very similar to your if statement, the condition and the execution process. In place of if, we are going to use while and put your condition, because you'll have to repeat your execution based on set of conditions based on your requirement, which is nothing but conditions. Not only one condition, here you can write multiple conditions. Whenever you want to validate multiple conditions at a time, then you will have to use logical operator, either and or. So while write your condition, not only one condition, here you can write a number of conditions. Beginning of while black, end of while black. In case of if, you can have both true black as well as false black. I mean, you can have both if and else. If the condition is true, true black execution will take place. Otherwise, it will go to false black. Right? But here, coming to while, there will be no false black. It contains only true black. Whatever the action is placed inside this true black, this action will be executed if and only if this condition is satisfied. This condition is true. If the condition is false, there will be no false black. If the condition is false, nothing will be executed in case of while. It will just come out of the loop. So whenever control comes to while loop, first it checks these conditions, like your if statement. First it checks this condition. It will go inside of this loop if and only if the condition is true. If the condition is false, it will not go inside of your loop, so nothing will be executed. So if the condition is false, no statement will be executed, no action will be executed at least once. So the action of while loop will be executed if and only if the condition is true. And the beauty of while loop is you can execute your statement, you can execute your action repeatedly based on set of conditions. Okay, so let's see how to print numbers from 1 to 100. So here, the most important thing that you need to learn in case of loops, whenever you want to repeat any execution, when you want to execute any action repeatedly, always you should think about three things. See, when you talk about a loop is really very powerful component in any programming language. If something cannot be possible in your requirement, yes, you can make everything possible with the help of loops. That is the power of loop. If you are really good in loop, you can write any kind of logic. Anything can be possible through loops. So in most of the real-time applications, 99% of the things can be implemented using loops. Without loop, you cannot write again logic. That can be a while, do while, or for, but loops plays one of the important key role in the real-time application. That's why you really need to be very strong at loops. Okay, simple. Okay, so whenever you want to write any loop, this is very important. Whenever you want to write any loop, you need to define three important things. you should think about three important things. What are those three important things? Where to start, where to start, where to end, and what is the variation between each iteration. These three are very, very important. Whenever you want to repeat your execution process, you need to define these three parts: where to start, where to end, and what is the variation between each iteration. See, if you look into our example, here you need to print numbers from 1 to 100. First, you should print 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, and the last number is going to be 100. If you look into this, we are going to start from 1. We are going to start from 1. And it has to be ended at 100. And every time, first it has to print 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So it should start from 1. And every time it has to be incremented with 1. Try to understand this. Whenever you need to implement any scenario, first you need to identify three things. What is the start point of this? Where to start, where to stop, and what is the variation between each iteration. If you look into this, we need to start from 1. It has to be stopped at 100. And every time, if you look into the difference from one number to another number, the difference is 1. So every time it has to be incremented with 1. So where to start? We should start at 1. Where to end? If the process should be end at 100. And what is the variation between each iteration? It is going to be 1. So always, if something needs to be executed repeatedly, you need to write a loop. Whenever you want to write a loop, you need to identify these three things: where to start, where to end, and what is the variation between each iteration. So if you look into this, here we are going to start from 1. It has to be stopped at 100 or 1000 or 1 lakh. And the variation between each iteration is going to be 1. Okay. Now let's try to implement this scenario using while loop. So as I said, whenever you want to repeat your execution, you need to define these three things. Where to start? Where to start? This is nothing but conditional part. I'm sorry. This is nothing but initialization part. Where to end? This is nothing but conditional part. In the technical terms, where to start is called as initialization part. Where to end is nothing but conditional part, and variation between each iteration is called as incremental or decremental part. Okay. Where to start is called as initialization part. Where to end is called as conditional part, and the variation between each iteration is called as incremental or decremental part. So first, if you want to repeat your execution, you need to define these three parts. So first, you need to define initialization part. First, you should tell the system where to start. So how to define this? So to define that initial value, that starting point, I'm going to take a variable called int. I'm declaring a variable called I. Where to start? It should start from 1. I've defined my initialization part. I told the system where to start. Next, conditional part. You should also tell the system where to end. That is nothing but your while loop. While here we should start from 1. The process should be stopped at 100. Right? So first I is going to be 1. Next I should be incremented with 2. Next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It has to be repeated up to only 100. So here I is less than or equal to 100. Because every time, now the starting point is 1. Once the 1 is printed, next time it should be 2. Next 3, 4, 5, 6. How many times it has to be repeated? Until it reaches 100. Once it reached 100, then the process should be stopped. Beginning of while and end of while. Beginning of while and end of while. Okay? Priyanka, please mute your... Okay. So try to understand this. As I said, we need to define 3 parts. Where to start, where to end, and what is the variation between each iteration. Where to start is called as initialization path. So yes, we have defined the starting point. Where to start, as per our requirement, it should start from 1. That's why we have specified the initial value as 1. Where to end, it should start from 1 and it has to go up to 100. So that's why our condition is I is less than or equal to 100. So once it reaches 100, the process should be stopped. Next, you should also define third part. Here int I is equal to 1 while I is less than or equal to 100. Let's say once when it comes to control, once the control comes to your execution process, first it will go to first statement, that is the int I is equal to 1. What is the value of I? 1. Next it will go to while loop. As I said, when you talk about a while, it will be very similar to your if. First it checks the condition. If the condition is true, then only it will go inside of your loop. Otherwise, it will just come out of this. So the action of while will be executed if and only if the condition is true. If the condition is false, it will not be executed for at least once. Okay? Okay. Now first, it will take the initial value, int I is equal to 1. What is the value of I? 1. Next it will go to next line, that is your while loop. It checks the condition. What is the value of I? 1. Is 1 is less than or equal to 100? Yes, 1 is less than 100. Condition is true. Now it will go inside of your loop. Here what has to be done? That number has to be printed. What is that number? 1. Console dot write line I. Now what will happen? What is the value of I? 1. So 1 will be printed. It prints 1. Next, what has to be done? Yes, we have printed 1. Next, 2 has to be printed. It means the current value of I should be incremented with 1. Next, 3 has to be printed. Next, 4 has to be printed. Next, 5 has to be printed. So every time it has to be incremented with 1. That is nothing but your variation part. Right? So what has to be done? Every time I has to be incremented with 1. I is equal to I plus 1. Okay. Now let me explain the execution. Okay. So try to listen this carefully. It is very, very important. Once the control comes to your main program, first it will define a variable called I, and we are assigning 1. Here I is going to be 1. Next it will go to second statement, that is while. In case of while, as I said, first it checks the condition, then execute the statements. This statement will be executed if and only if the condition is true. What is the value of I? 1. Is 1 is less than or equal 100? Yes, 1 is less than 100. Condition is true. If the condition is true, it will enter into the loop, true black. Yes, it will go inside of this. Here, whatever is there inside of this, it will take care of executing all your instructions. So first, we have written console.writeLine of I. So what has to be done? First, 1 has to be printed. That is the reason we are writing output statement. Console.writeLine I. So what is the value of I? 1. So 1 is printed. Next, what has to be printed? Next, 2 has to be printed. That's why what I'm doing here, I'm incrementing I value with 1. Now what is the value of I? 2. In case of if, so what will be done? In case of if, it checks the condition and executes the statement. The statement will be executed if and only if the condition is true, and that the statement will be executed only once throughout the lifetime. But in case of while, it is different. After completing the execution process, it will not go outside of this loop. Again, it checks the condition. Now, what is the value of I? 2, because we have incremented it with 2. Is 2 less than or equal to 100? Yes, condition is true. 2 is less than 100. Again, it will come inside of your loop. Again, it will start executing the instructions. Console.writeLine I. Now, what is the value of I? 2. So, 2 will be printed. Next, again, I is going to be incremented with 1. What is the value of I? 2. 2 plus 1, 3. Again, it will go to your while and check the condition. What is the value of I? 3. Is 3 is less than or equal to 100? Yes, 3 is less than 100. It will go inside of this console.writeLine I. So 3 will be printed. Now it is going to be 4. Again it checks the condition. Next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It keeps on checking the condition until it reaches this end limit. Until this reaches this end limit. It keeps on adding 1. First it is 1, next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, 11, 99, 100. So once it reaches 100, so 100 will be printed. Next, it is going to be 100 plus 1, 101. Again, it checks this condition. What is the value of I? 101. Is 101 is less than or equal to 100? No. 101 is greater than 100. Now the condition has become false. Once the condition is false, it will not go inside of this. It will just come out of side of your loop. So this execution will be repeated till the condition is true. This execution will be repeated till the condition is true. Once the condition becomes false, it will come outside of your loop. So this execution process will be stopped. If I say 1000, what will happen? This loop will be repeated 1000 different times. If I say 10,000, it will be repeated 10,000 times and 10,000 numbers will be displayed. If I say 1 lakh, this loop will be repeated 1 lakh times and your 1 lakh numbers will be printed. In the previous case, we used to write 1 lakh different statements to print 1 lakh numbers. But here, we have written this statement only once. What is our action? Printing a number. We have written our action only once and repeating the same execution in different times based on our requirement, based on set of conditions. When any action has to be executed repeatedly, that action has to be placed inside a loop, and you should tell the system how many times that execution has to be repeated, which is nothing but your condition. That is the reason if you don't specify this incremental or decremental part. So what will happen? Once control comes to your loop, what is the value of I? 1. 1 will be printed. Next, it checks the condition. What is the value of I? 1 only. Every time it is 1 only. It will never reach this target, this end limit. Right? Because we are not pushing it forward. Every time it will be 1 only. So it will enter into the infinity loop because system doesn't know where to end. You have specified it should be stopped at 1 lakh, but you should push it forward, right, to reach the target. So that is the reason variation part is required. So every time it has to be incremented with 1. First it will be 1. 1 will be printed. Next 2. It checks the condition. Is 2 is less than or equal to 1 lakh? No. Again it will go inside of the loop. Print 2. Next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So once it reaches 1 lakh, 1 lakh will be printed. It checks the condition. Is 1 lakh is less than or equal to 1 lakh? Yes. 1 lakh is less than or equal to. Yes. 1 lakh is equal to 1 lakh. Condition is true. It will print 1 lakh. Next it is going to be 1 lakh 1. Again it checks the condition. What is the value of I? 1 lakh 1. Is 1 lakh 1 is less than or equal to 1 lakh? No. 1 lakh is greater than 1 lakh. Now the condition is going to be false. So it will not go inside of your loop. It will just come outside of your process. Okay. Let's check this. I just give 10. 10. Keep your debugger. See, so let's pin this I value. Okay. What is the value of I now? 0. Now we are going to assign a start value. Now what is the value of I? It's 1. Now it checks the condition. Is I is less or equal to 10? What is the value of I? 1. Is 1 is less or equal to 10? Yes, 1 is less than 10. Condition is true. It will go inside of your loop. Now I, we are printing, we are saying the system that print I. What is the value of I? 1. 1 will be printed. Yes. Now I is going to be 2 because we have incremented with I with 2. It will not go outside of loop. Now it will go to again your while condition, checks the condition. So it keeps on checking the condition until the condition becomes false. See, what is the value of I? 2. Is 2 is less than or equal to 10? Yes, 2 is less than 10. Again it will go inside of this print to 2. Now I is 3. Again it checks the condition. Is 3 is less than or equal to 10? Yes, condition is true. It prints 3. Now I is 4. Is 4 is less than or equal to 10? Yes, condition is true. It will go inside of your loop. Prints 4. Now I is 5. 6. 7. Is 7 less than or equal to 10? Yes. Print 7. 8. Is 8 is less than or equal to 10? Yes. Now it is 9. Is 9 is less than or equal to 10? Yes, 9 is less than 10. So 9 will be printed. Now I is going to be 10. Is 10 is less than or equal to 10? Yes, less than or equal to. Yes, 10 is equal to 10. It prints 10. Now I is going to be 11. Again checks the condition. Is 11 is less than or equal to 10? No, 11 is greater than 10. So it will not go inside of your loop. It will just come outside of loop. Now you can see numbers from 1 to 10. See 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, any questions guys so far? Any questions? Okay, so as I said, whenever you want to repeat the execution of any action, so that has to place inside the loop, but do remember that whenever you want to write a loop, you need to think about, you need to identify 3 parts. What are those? Where to start, which is nothing but your initialization part, where to end, which is nothing but your conditional part, and what is the variation. That is very, very important. In order to repeat your execution, you have to identify the variation between each iteration. You should tell the system whether this initial part has to be incremented with 2 or 3, 1. That depends upon your requirement. Okay. Now let's discuss another scenario. In between 1 and 100, in between 1 and 100, I would like to display only even numbers. Display only even numbers between 1 to 100. So how do you write the logic? Even numbers means first to 2, right? Next 4, next 6, 8, 10, so on, and last one is going to be 100. Or 1000 or 10,000, it can be anything. In between this range from 2 to 100, you need to print all even numbers. Here we have 2 different logics, right? So if you look into this, it is going to start from 2 and it has to be ended at 100, and every time it is getting incremented with 2. So the start point is going to be 2. It has to be repeated up to 100 times. and every time it has to be incremented with 2. Now just run your application. So here you can see only even numbers. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Print odd numbers, only odd numbers. It means 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 99. See, if you look into this, it is going to start from 1. And the difference between each number is 2. So the variation between each iteration is going to be 2. And the end limit is going to be 1000, or you can say 99. So your I is going to start from 1. End limit is going to be 99. And every time it has to be, the variation between each number is 2. Now you will see all odd numbers. See. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. This is logical scenario, but ultimately you'll have to decide. Just write one program, we'll try another program. Write a program to print even and odd numbers between 500 and 1000 between any given range. Write a program to print even and odd. We should print both even numbers as well as odd numbers. Let's say 500 is even, 501 is odd number. Again 502 is even, 503 is an odd number. You need to print like that between given range. Basically, whenever you want to identify whether it is even or odd, what you do? We already implemented one program for that, right? Whenever you want to decide the even or odd numbers, so what you have to do? You have to divide that particular number with 2 and check its remainder. If the remainder is equal to 0, print it as even number, otherwise print it as odd number, right? Whenever you want to decide whether that particular number is even or odd, so what has to be done? That number has to be divided with 2 and check its remainder. If the remainder is equal to 0, then consider it as even, otherwise consider it as odd number, right? That is our logic for one number. But here you need to check each and every number between 500 and 1000. It means you need to apply that same logic for each and every number between this range, between 500 and 1000. It means first we'll have to take 500, apply your logic and decide whether it is even or odd. Next take another number 501, apply that same logic. Next take 502, apply that same logic, 503, 504. So between 500 and 1000, the logic has to be applied for each and every number to decide it is even category or odd category. Okay, so that is what we are going to do here. So what is our range? We are going to start from 500. Between 500 and 1000, see here. Between 500 and 1000, you need to identify all even and odd numbers. So it is going to start from 500. First you have to check when 500 is even or odd. If it is even, print it as even, otherwise print it as odd. Next you will have to check 501. Next you will have to check 502, 503, like this. It has to be repeated up to 1000. So as I said, whenever you want to repeat your execution process, here what is our action? Identifying even and odd number. That is what our action, right? So that action has to be repeated for each and every number between 500 and 1000. That is the reason I don't want to write my action again and again. I want to write my action only once, and that has to be repeated, that has to be executed repeatedly for each and every number. The same action has to be executed repeatedly between 500 and 1000, and it should take care of verifying each and every number between 500 and 1000. That is the reason I'd like to take a loop and keep my action inside the loop. Okay, because our action is you have to check the divide number with 2, check its remainder, and decide whether it is even or not. That is what our action. Here not only one number, we are going to check more than one number between 500 and 1000. All numbers between 500 and 1000 has to be tested. So that is the reason I don't want to write my logic again and again for each and every number. I want to write it only once. That action has to be executed for each and every number between 500 and 1000. That is the reason I would like to go with a loop. Whenever the same action has to be executed repeatedly in different times, then your approach should be towards loop. That is the reason I'd like to take a loop and keep my action inside the loop, and I want to apply that action for each and every number between 500 and 1000. So as I said, whenever you want to write a loop, you need to identify 3 things. What are those? Where to start, where to end, and what is the variation between each iteration. So if you look into this, we need to test all the numbers between 500 and 1000. So obviously you need to start from 500. So our starting point is going to be 500. Where to end? It has to be repeated up to 1000. And what is the variation between each iteration? First you have to check 500, then 501, 502, 503. So what is the difference between these? 1. So every time it has to be incremented with 1. So I is equal to I plus 1. Yes, we have defined those 3 parts. Now you need to write your action. What is our action? Once the control comes to your loop, what is the value of I? 500. Is 500 is less than or equal to 1000? Yes, 500 is less than 1000. Now what you need to do? You'll have to check whether the 500 is even or odd. So how do you check it? You need to write your logic. What is that logic? Divide that number with 2, get its remainder. If the remainder is equal to 0, print it as even, otherwise print it as odd. Okay, thus I am defining one more variable that is called remainder. A remainder is equal to, check the number, divide the number with 2. What is the number? The number is there in I mod 2. When it comes to the first iteration, I is going to be 500. It will divide 500 with 2 and generates a remainder which is going to be stored under rem. Now check this remainder. If a remainder is equal to 0, print it as even. Console dot write line I is nothing but number, is an even. Else console dot write line I is nothing but your number, is an right. So this is what our action. What is our action? Deciding even or odd. This is what our action. Now the same action has to be applied for each and every number between the range of 500 and 1000. When it comes to the first iteration, it is going to start from 500, right? Once it comes to the loop, it will check this condition. What is the value of I? 500. Is 500 is less than or equal to 1000? Yes, 500 is less than 1000. It will go, the condition is true, so it will go inside of your loop. Now you'll have to decide this number is even or odd. What is that number? The number is there in I variable. Now what is the value of I? 500. It will divide 500 with 2 and gets its remainder. It checks its remainder. If remainder is equal to 0, it will be displayed as 500 is an even. Otherwise, it will be displayed as 500 is an odd. Now 500 is going to be incremented with 1. Now it will become 501. Is 501 is less than or equal to 1000? Yes, condition is true. It will go inside of your loop. Again, same, you should decide. You should also test 501. So again, same process. Check its remainder. If it is 0, print it as even, otherwise odd. Next is going to be 502. It will check 502. Next 503. It also checks 503, 504, 505, 506. So the same logic will be applied for each and every number between the range of 500 and 1000. So this logic will decide the even and odd numbers between the range of 500 and 1000. So once it reaches 1001, it checks the condition again. Is 1001 is less than or equal to 1000? No, condition is false. It will just come outside of your loop. Okay, so let's keep a breakpoint and run this execution. I'm not going to take 1000. I'm going to take only 10 or just 600, 500 and 600. If you put 1000, there will be, you cannot see all these things on your small screen. Anything you get, this end limit can be a 10,000, 1 lakh, 1 crore. You can put anything. See, what is the value of I? 500. First, it checks the condition. Also, pin reminder. What is the value of I? 500. Now it is dividing 500 with 2. What is the remainder? 2. If remainder is equal to 0, it will be printed as even. Yes, remainder is 0. That's why. How it will be printed? I. What is the value of I? 500. So 500 plus this message. 500 is an even. Next, I is going to be 501. See, it has become 501 because we have incremented it with 1. Is 501 is less than or equal to 600? Yes, condition is true. Again, it calculates. It applies that same logic for next number, that is 501. It divides 501 with 2. What is the remainder? Remainder is 1. So it will be printed as odd number. Next, 502. Same, it applies that same logic for 502. Next, 503. It applies that same logic for 503. 504, 505. So you can put any endpoint. So the same action will be executed repeatedly these many times. The same action has to be applied for each and every number between 500 and 600 or 1000, whatever it is. Right? So we have written our logic only once and executing this repeatedly in different times. So this is the beauty of loop. Write it only once and get your execution repeated in different times based on your requirement, based on set of conditions. See, 500 is an even, 501 is an odd, 502 is an even, 503 is an odd. Like this, you can print a number of things. Any questions, guys, for far? Did you understand the concept of loop? Okay. So here I'll be explaining very good examples. I'll also let you practice very good examples using loops. Because if you really understand the concept, you can implement any kind of logic using loops. Anything can be possible through loop. That is the beauty of loop. Okay? Okay. So this is something about while. So what is do while? Let's move towards the next concept, that is do while.